Hello, everybody, and welcome to NIMSY Live. My name is Tucker Johnson, and I will be your host today as we talk about the latest and greatest in translation, localization, internationalization, culturalization, and all that fun stuff global companies need to delight their international customers, or at least not to piss them off too much. On this program, we invite guests who like to have fun and have some value to add for our audience of globalization professionals. I'm always eager to provide a platform to those with a good story or a good data set. So let us know if there are any topics you'd like covered or guests we should reach out to for future episodes. If you haven't already done so, make sure to subscribe to NIMSY Insights, either here on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all of the other ones that we are, whatever platform you're watching this on. YouTube, we'll be archiving this episode on YouTube as always, and subscribe to us, and also make sure to subscribe to Clear Global and Translators Without Borders, our guest today. I put some links over on LinkedIn if you're here on the live stream to make it really easy for you to go check that stuff out and give them a follow, because they're doing a lot of interesting stuff, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Before we get any further, I got to give a quick plug because we got a new issue of Multilingual Magazine coming out soon. I am special, so I get an advanced copy, and I have mine right here, so I get a sneak peek. But if you haven't gotten yours yet, go check your mailbox, because it will be coming to a mailbox near you very, very soon. If this is the first time you're joining us on a live stream, then welcome. We like to do these live, keep things fresh, and that means that we got people in the comments over here. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, anything besides hate speech, go ahead and put it in the comments, and we'll bring those up on screen and address it with our guest today. If the stream gets interrupted at any point, then don't worry, head on over to YouTube, and we'll be archiving the whole program there. So that you can watch live. We also be uploading this as a podcast on Spotify, iTunes, all of that stuff. So if you're a podcast guy or gal, then you can listen to it as a podcast after we got that uploaded today. So without further ado, today we are talking with Clear Global, Aimee Ansari from Clear Global and Translators Without Borders. A quick introduction there. Let me go over, bring you up on screen here. Hi, Aimee.
Hello.
Thank you for coming on the show today. Let me try to give you an introduction here, and you can tell me all of the points that I forgot or missed here. Clear Global and Translators Without Borders achieved a lot in 2022, but there's so much more to do, and they need all of the support that they can get. And this is why we're coming to you live today to talk about some of the activities that they're doing and how you, our listeners and our audience, can help get involved. Because this is a question that I get asked quite a bit when I talk about Translators Without Borders and Clear Global is how can like, I know that they're doing good work. What can I do to help them out? So today we're going to learn how you can help grow the language technology language technology solutions in 2023, and build more tools to help provide vital information around global issues such as climate change, forced displacement, public health, and women's reproductive health and rights. Clear Global is the organization. Translators Without Borders is the community at the heart of the organization, powering the work with vital language services. Aimee has over 20 years experience in leadership positions in large humanitarian and development organizations. She has worked in several humanitarian crises, from the Tajik civil war to the earthquake in Haiti, the conflicts in the Balkans, the Syrian refugee crisis, and the conflicts in South Sudan. Prior to joining Translators Without Borders, which is now Clear Global, in 2016, Aimee worked with CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and the United Nations. Aimee, Welcome to the show. That's quite the impressive resume that you have here. You've been around. You've seen a few things.
I have been around. It makes me sound quite old, actually, now that the war in the Balkans, the Tajik Civil War, that was a long time
Yeah,
ago.
you're dating yourself there. You're dating
Yeah.
yourself a little bit with that bio, but all very good stuff. And all of this stuff, and I know Translators Without Borders is involved in so much. Well, forgive me. I date myself because I keep referring to it's just habit. I always want to say Translators Without Borders. And yes, I know it's Clear Global now. But I know there's a lot of old fogies like me out there that just have TWB on the brain. So why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about your organization, Clear Global, and the community, Translators Without Borders. What are those two organizations? What do you do? And how do they relate to each other?
So like you said in the introduction, Translators Without Borders is the community that is at the heart of Clear Global. And we became Clear Global. Translators Without Borders is a very vibrant community, and there's a lot of emotive quality behind the name Translators Without Borders. And also when you say that you work for Translators Without Borders, people assume, and everybody in the language industry understands this, I'm sure, because people assume that all you do is translation. And so we were going into meetings and talking about language technology and helping people to communicate more effectively. And they looked at us and said, yeah, we just really want you to translate.
Okay.
So we had decided to evolve the brand to Clear Global. And part of Clear Global is Translators Without Borders. It's also Clear Insights, through which we do a lot of the research on what languages people speak, how they like to communicate, what sources of information they trust, who they trust to get it from. And Clear Technology, which builds a lot of the language technology solutions that we develop and implement. And that's really critical to the mandate of Clear Tech. It's not we're just building, Amharic speech recognition.
Right.
We're building Amharic speech recognition so somebody can use it, so people who speak Amharic can get information they need about climate change, as you said, about women's reproductive health, or any of the vital issues that affect their lives.
Well, and at the heart of what you guys do, it's about what's so near and dear to a lot of our hearts in the language services industry, which is connecting people and making sure that people have a voice, regardless of their background, regardless of their culture, regardless of their language, making sure that people have a voice. And us evil businessmen on the corporate side over here is it's like, yeah, we want people to have a voice. We're passionate about that, but we also need to make a profit margin. And it's not profitable to do a lot of the stuff that you guys are doing around the world because when there's a crisis, that means resources are strapped, and a lot of the communities that are affected, the are infected the most when a crisis happens and need the most help are the ones without the resources to actually be able to provide translation. So that's kind of where
Well,
you guys step in, right?
yeah, I mean, it's there are 4 billion people and there are 8 billion people in the world in total. 4 billion of those people speak power languages: Russian, French, English, Spanish, Swahili, whatever. um, Another 4 billion don't speak those languages,
Mm,
so they can't get information even in the midst of a crisis, or especially in the midst of a crisis. The information is going to be in English and French and Swahili. It's those 4 billion people who can't get that information. And at the core of that, it's because the way that power works in the world is that people with information, people who speak power languages, have power. And so
right.
we're trying to flip that power dynamic
So,
by helping people get voice and be heard, and get the information they need to make decisions that affect their lives.
yeah, so kind of equalizing the power, right, or neutralizing the power dynamic
Trying,
in
yes.
it,
That's
giving
the long game, of course. That's,
the long
yeah.
game, yeah, giving. I mean, not to sound cliche, but giving a voice to the voiceless,
Yeah.
essentially, right?
Um, the voice is a lot of it, and that voice starts with information and communications, and that's where we've decided to start.
Let's and for those of you, I know I mentioned it in the intro, but I put a link into the LinkedIn for Clear Global's website. Go ahead and head over there if you want to find out more about what they are doing or what they do on an ongoing basis. And I mean, the main point that I want to drive home here today is this donate button here. There are other ways to get involved. They have a get involved tab up here. And there's opportunities for individual sponsorships and donations. There's opportunities for corporate sponsors and donations. And right now, you are running your, what is it, the holiday campaign, end of year campaign? What's the branding on this?
Well, it's called Meet Me in My Language.
Meet Me in My Language.
Yeah, so it's really about what we were just talking about. It's asking people who need information, whose lives are affected by not having information. They can't make informed decisions because they don't have that information unless they come to us, unless they speak our language. And so the campaign is really about helping us to meet them in their language so they can really understand information. The campaign has so far been really quite successful. We've just gone over $100,000 for the campaign, which is excellent.
Wow.
Really excited about it. Our goal is $120,000, so we're almost there.
Almost there.
We made it 105. So so any donations are very, very much appreciated, and those donations then can help us to do things like go into crises and be prepared to go to like Ukraine. Last year, I went to Lviv in late March, early April. The 2 Easters I was there, because we have sponsors, because we have donors that allow me to be able, or us. Not generally me. I went because I have a background in Slavic languages, so I could go and understand a little bit. But the donations allow us to be able to do that, to respond to those crises, to go to see what the needs are, and then make sure we're deploying resources. We use the money we gain from donations and sponsors to then talk to other donors, bigger institutional donors, to leverage that into a broader range of support that we can give. Based on real conversations with people about what they really need and want in terms of language and communications.
Yeah, and you do a lot of work around crises that hit. So when there's an earthquake, when there's a war, when there's some sort of natural disaster, anything like that, it's like all hands on deck, and we need to jump into action. And one thing that I've found is that when a crisis hits, during a crisis, not even during a crisis, but like at the beginning of a crisis, people are very interested in how do I get involved? How do I make a difference? And we saw that in a big way with the war in Ukraine. That was 7 months ago. It was a while ago when war broke out in Ukraine, when Russia invaded Ukraine. And there was a lot of talk about it. And there's still a war in Ukraine right now. And I think it's just natural human psychology or whatever is like people it goes onto the back burner. It becomes normalized a little bit, even though the bad stuff, for lack of a better term, is still continuing to happen. And I just wanted to call that out because so I started by saying you need to jump into action when crisis hits, and in order to jump into action, you need the resources available to begin with. You can't wait several weeks for donations to start flooding in, right? And this is why.
Yeah. And then a lot of the crises, right now we're responding to a food crisis in the Horn of Africa. We're going to get pretty close to famine levels in the Horn of Africa this year. Which is really frightening. People talk about famine, but you don't really have many real big famines anymore globally. The aid system is set up to prevent that, but the aid system isn't working very well right now for the Horn of Africa.
Why is that? Loaded question, eh? Loaded question. So,
do I want to talk about that right now?
Yeah. Well, let's just say we can. If this is the first time, frankly, ashamed to say, first time I'm hearing about it. First time I'm hearing about a food crisis in the Horn of Africa. Like when I open up Google News on my phone and check the news every morning, that hasn't come up.
No, you're more likely to read about what Zendaya wore yesterday.
Yeah.
But yes, there's also a crisis in Pakistan right now that we're responding to. Um, there's a lot of crises that go on. The war that when I was in South Sudan in 2013, there was a civil war that started while I was there. That war is still ongoing. It doesn't stop. It hasn't stopped. It goes, up and down, but people are still dying there, and we don't hear about it globally. But we are doing some really, Somalia, I'm really excited, if I can just say. I know you say this is really conversational, but this is really a cool thing that we're doing.
Let's do it.
In Somalia, we're doing a study in Somalia where we're looking at the various dialects of Somali and looking at their mutual intelligibility around language that relates to the aid industry. So mostly about food and livelihoods and things like that right now. And then that's never been done before for Somali. Then that should help aid workers to be able to communicate really much more effectively, because we can't do a lot face to face in Somalia. It's quite a dangerous place. So we have to do much of the work remotely through organizations and with organizations in Somalia. We tend to do things where we just translate into Somali, or we ask some random Somali person to, an aid worker will go to their driver and say, can you translate this into Somali? Right. Without really understanding if it this part of Somalia or that part of Somalia, and if the two dialects are really mutually intelligible. Yeah. So, really language geeky, but super cool.
Language geeky is important, because that's what I was thinking as you were just telling me about this, and it's the same all around the world. We do some work with like accessibility, language access and accessibility and equity and all of that stuff here in the United States. And lots of well-intentioned people, legislators, directors want to improve language access, want to improve equity with their populations here in the United States. And because the United States is a country without an official language. People have this misconception that English is the official language of the United States, and it's not. We have no official language, and it's also a country of immigrants. So we have a lot of different people from different cultures, speaking different languages, and they have a disparate access to resources, particularly from the government. So I say all that to say that a lot of well-meaning legislators will try to improve language access, but they don't get the language geeky, as you call it, right? So and the devil's in the details. The devil's in the details. Like, we have a large Hispanic population, so we need to start translating into Spanish. Okay, are you sure they speak Spanish? Right? Because there are a ton of South and Central American dialects and languages that maybe we need to take a look at, right? So I think that's, in support of the need for language geeks to come in and do this kind of stuff.
Language geeks and anthropologists and people who really, one of the things that happened in Greece when the refugees were coming mostly from Syria was that people smugglers were identifying people from certain villages or certain parts of Syria and using those people to try to convince young men in particular to be smuggled. And the reason why they did that was because if they spoke the same kind of Arabic, the same sort of accent, the same, dialect of Arabic, then they were much more likely to trust. The young men were much more likely to trust this people smuggler and go with them than any aid worker or anybody else, any government official who didn't speak their language. So a lot of young men were smuggled because that was the only person they understood and the only person that they could get information that they could understand. Yeah. It's just desperate situations, and you want to go with somebody you trust, and that's part of what the research we do is where do people want to get information? What do they trust? Who do they trust? Yeah. Do they trust a religious leader? In Ukraine right now, we've just completed some research. People are checking 30 or 40 different places to find out information and triangulate it, in different languages.
Well, even if you're an English speaker trying to follow a crisis in an English speaking location, like when you're in the fog of war, and sometimes literally fog of war, sometimes figuratively fog of war. But when you're in the
Mhm.
fog of war, there's so much information out there, and you don't have time to fact check everything. So it's very difficult for people to understand what to trust. And so what happens is people have their trusted pundits, essentially, their trusted sources of information, right?
Mm.
And whether that's good or bad is a whole different debate, but that's what people fall back to. People are going to go to the sources that they trust. And if you're a stranger coming from a strange land, speaking a strange language, you're going to be low on that list of trusted sources of information, which opens them up for all sorts of exploitation and fake news and all of that other stuff.
Well, and even if you're looking, say, for information from, say, the World Food Program or any of the UN agencies, you have to know which one to go to, and that has to be in the right language, and it
Yep.
has to be communicated effectively. And if you've ever been to one of the UN agencies' websites, no offense to them, but they're often put up very quickly without any thought to user
User
experience,
experience. Yeah.
interface or anything like that. And so that's a lot of what we've done in a number of crises, is say, if you really want people to get information, you have to talk to them about what information they need and how they want to get that information and what's intuitive. We've also, for Ukraine in particular, because there just was so many sources of information and some of it contradictory, we've developed a sort of gateway, which different organizations will put on their websites so that only trusted sources of information can be accessed there. So it's a question and ask. And so you ask a question, and it's a bit like Google. So you ask a question of where can I enroll my child in school, and then it will give you a search result of that for your location in your language. But only from trusted sources of information, not just every source of information out there.
So you're kind of like pre-vetting the information.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and making it searchable and all of that, easily accessible to people.
So what ongoing work are you still doing, just out of curiosity, in Ukraine?
So we've got, yesterday we did a training for a couple of hundred translators and interpreters, field translators and interpreters, on on humanitarian interpretation, on some terminology, on the ethics and principles around interpreting, and some self-care, because interpreting, it can be quite traumatic in those situations.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's one big piece of what we're doing now. Like I said, we've just finished some research and planning to do some more on how people are getting information, how they like to get information, what gaps they have in information provision. And we're building this gateway, this multilingual gateway, which will give people a source, one source across many, many websites of trusted information.
And who do you partner with? Do you partner with different agencies to do this, like in different, like locals and stuff like that, or is this all built from the ground up?
Um, yes.
Fair
Is the
enough.
short answer.
Fair enough.
So yes, we partner with a number of
It's like
different
I know the answer is because you do what you need to do.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
And I think
exactly.
this is why there's a need for organizations like NGOs, like you guys, because you're less beholden to the bureaucracy of someone like the United Nations, right? Which is going to need to do certain things. And you can just go in and figure out what needs to be done. I remember talking to you guys before, um, or was I talking or was someone else talking? It might have been a podcast I listened to. I lose track between my podcast and other people's. But talking about like getting interpreters for some of these languages of lesser diffusion, long tail languages, whatever the terminology is these days. And during a crisis, you don't have time to make sure that who cares if they've got credentials and, can pass quality. Like, you just need people to communicate, right? So you roll up your sleeves and do what needs to be done.
Yeah, and if that's that's often finding people who are bilinguals and supporting and training them,
Yep.
and developing glossaries so that they have resources. We just put out a couple of glossaries for the Ukraine crisis. So in Ukrainian, Russian, Polish, Hungarian, Romanian, something else. Can't remember.
Yeah, I saw that. I was bringing your website up on screen here. Romani,
Romani.
I
Yeah.
see. Yeah.
Yeah. We're probably the only organization that's working in Romani right
I
now.
was gonna say, I mean, there's no profit. I mean, that's because, I mean, there's no profit margin in Romani, right? I mean, I'm sorry to say, I don't think I'm being controversial when I say that, right? But typically, innovation and like machine translation, innovation and development, education, maturation of language processes is driven by, I mean, you follow the money. It's driven by global organizations because they're the ones with the budgets to invest into that. And we're seeing this fascinating thing now. I was having a conversation with someone at Loc World where it's like machine translation is reaching its like point of like this is about as good as it's going to get because I mean for the main for these power languages as you call them because it's we're seeing decreasing return on investment for every dollar that we invest into improving the output. We're seeing decreasing returns on that. So the prediction is that machine translation is going to start leveling out here pretty soon in for all intents and purposes in a meaningful way. And what's left on the table is these languages, these long tail languages that, you know, Microsoft isn't prioritizing spending millions of dollars. So machine translation is going to become, or improving machine translation is going to become more of the domain of academics, NGOs, and philanthropic organizations.
Mm.
I don't know where I was going with that.
I mean, I mean, I'm sure that's true. I mean, why else would you do it? There's you know, people who speak Nuer and don't have a whole lot of money. They're not going to be buying products.
Right. And I mean, it's telling, I shouldn't admit this, but it's telling that I've worked in this industry for, well, I don't want to date myself either, but I've been here a while and I've never heard of the name of that language before that you just mentioned, Nuer. Where's that from?
South Sudan.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's one of those.
You know,
one of the big languages in South Sudan for what it's
I'm
worth.
kind of ashamed to admit that I don't know that language, but I will do it live on air just to illustrate the point that these languages, they need somebody looking after them.
Yeah, and it has to be, we work with a network in sub-Saharan Africa called Masakane.
Okay.
Which is a super cool network of mostly academics who are building data sets, language data sets, and you know, developing different language technologies in a very academic research environment. What we add to that network is we try to apply it and use it in the real world, in real life situations, to help people who speak those languages.
Got it. I wanted to, I'll bring myself here. I wanted to go over, you have the sponsorship impact report from 2022, because ultimately here, what I want people to take away from this podcast is how they can help all of this stuff. We've talked about some of the stuff that you're doing. We've just scratched the surface, I'm sure. And that's why I encourage everybody that's listening, go over there to their website and make sure that you're checking out, download their case studies and white papers, and take a look, all of the interesting stuff that they're doing. It's really fascinating. So, but the reason I want to talk about that is essentially to understand what you guys do, and because the next logical question is, well, geez, this sounds awesome. How do I help? And I think this is me talking, not you talking, because okay, so caveat: this is Tucker, not Clear, not Translators Without Borders. But I would recommend people donate. I think money is a resource that's always in demand, and I say that because I know a lot of people want to get involved, and I want to actually, you know, get my hands dirty and get involved. And I think there's a time and a place for that. But unless you're a linguist that actually speaks some of these in-demand languages, I know you have occasional needs for project management and stuff like that. But money is the liquidity of money is like you can do so much with that and help so many people with that. And once again, this is Tucker talking. This isn't Clear shamelessly asking for money. This is me shamelessly asking for money for these guys. But I wanted to go over the sponsorship impact report, and maybe you can walk us through this. It's two pages. Let me put a link to it in chat. I think would be a good idea. and then bring it back. I'll put a link in chat over on LinkedIn, but walk us through this.
Sure. So, I mean, one of the things I haven't talked a lot about is the community of linguists and graphic designers and voiceover artists and plain language editors. We have a community of over 100,000 people that is Translators Without Borders. We're incredibly grateful to those people. We do have a lot of work in French and Spanish and Arabic and so-called power languages. And are grateful.
Okay. I stand corrected. That's why I said it was me. It was me because I sound like an ass saying like, "Oh, we don't need you. We just need your money." But yes, acknowledgement, credit where credit's due. Acknowledgement to all of those people because I know you have a huge community of people that are working with you guys.
We're very fortunate.
Yeah,
100,000 people. It's amazing. Who are very, very active. The community in Uganda just got together. They just did a little meetup to talk about building basically a term base for one of the languages in Uganda. So, very active community.
Nice.
Super cool. But those communities, they need a little bit of support to be able to do that.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not for free. I mean, a lot of it is for free, but sometimes, a cup of coffee helps,
Yeah.
And it helps bring people together.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Interpreters need to eat.
They do.
Right?
They really do.
They can give, even if they're volunteering and donating their time and their expertise, like while they're volunteering their time and their expertise, they need to keep the lights on.
Well, and if you've ever managed a community of any size, you know that
I have, and I refuse to ever again.
Yeah, we have a lovely, amazing community team headed by Manuela Noski, who's wonderful.
She's lovely.
She's great. And it's not an easy job. So that's a lot of what her team do is support that, the management development and motivation of that community. So one way is, of course, to volunteer. Donating helps. I mean, you're absolutely right, Tucker. Thank you so much for understanding. So what we have done in 2022, and this is really pretty much 2022, and it already has to be updated because we're probably going to translate about 26 to 30 million words a year. The number of language maps we've developed this year was just 3. But overall, we have probably the only language maps in the world with geopolitical boundaries. They've been downloaded thousands and thousands of times.
I'm sorry to derail us. This is my day for derailing. Language maps with geopolitical boundaries. Can you explain that? Because that sounds fascinating to me.
So when you, if you Google Nande, you will get a blob on a map of where Nande is spoken.
Got it.
On a map of, say, and that blob will cover parts of Eastern DRC, a bit of Rwanda, maybe a little bit of Tanzania. I don't know exactly where Nande is spoken, but you won't know where in Eastern DRC Nande is spoken.
Got it. Okay. So, I mean, that's one thing that, folks where I come from don't even realize. People think language equals country. And in most of the world, language does not, I mean, there's overlap, right? There's overlap, but language does not equal country.
No, I mean,
borders don't respect language groups, right? Because borders were written, a lot of borders were drawn by people that don't speak the local language. And they just, this river looks like a great place to put a border.
Or this line.
Let's just draw a straight line. Exactly.
Straight line. The language maps are very interesting. And also, people move.
Right.
People don't just stay in one place. A disaster happens in this part of Mozambique. This whole group of people who speak this language move here. Then you have another disaster here. You don't know that those people live there anymore, that language is spoken there. But it's also in the U.S.
Sure. Yeah.
New York, Brooklyn, what is it? 100 languages in Brooklyn? Something like that.
Yeah.
It's the most linguistically diverse place on the planet.
That's crazy. Is that true?
Yeah.
Brooklyn?
Yeah. Yeah.
Brooklyn is the most linguistically diverse place on the planet.
There's an area,
I learned something new today. That's awesome.
The most linguistically diverse square 10 kilometers or something, on the planet. Yeah, and the New York subway is fascinating. All those languages in the subway.
New York's a different country, though. I don't count New York as part of the U.S. It's literally just it's a different country. Like when I go to New York, I feel like I'm in a different country.
Yeah, me too.
But, which is like a cool country. No disrespect, New York. But
also, a few years ago, we did language maps for the American Red Cross for Florida. Because Florida is incredibly linguistically diverse,
right?
And there are pockets of communities in Florida where they're majority first language German speakers.
Really?
And most of those people are quite old, and so while their English is very good, if they're being told how to tape up their windows as a hurricane preparedness measure, they want that information in German.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're doing, actually, here at NIMSY Insights, we're doing some work with a county down in California. I think I can talk about it, but I won't. A county down in California that a couple years ago had really bad wildfires and just sweep through and destroy people's homes, destroy communities, as happens in California. I'm from California. It happens every year. There's bad wildfires. And
I'm in California right now.
Okay, right. So you get it. And my brother's a firefighter in California. So that's job security right there. He'll always have a job. But what they realized, unfortunately, it took them, and this is a progressive county that had language access procedures, no disrespect to what they were doing before, but it goes back to that sometimes you need a language geek, right? Because they thought that they had a good system, but when the crisis hit in that fog of war, that's when they realized that, oh my gosh, this system breaks as soon as we introduce a crisis, and a crisis is when you need the system most.
Yeah.
And so that's, we're in there helping them figure out new language access plan and all of that stuff to make sure that when or if the next wildfire, earthquake, whatever happens, people that don't speak English have access to, because there's no time. There's no time to schedule a translator, reach out and take advantage of regular resources. They need the information in their local language right now.
Yes, that's a lot of what we do. And if there's anything we can do to support or advise, let us know. I'm glad you're doing that. That's really great work.
Yeah, I might take you up on that. Might bring you in. Let's back to the sponsorship impact report. So 3 new language maps. Because I derailed you asking you about the language maps because I'm a wannabe map geek. I'm not a map geek because that would be disrespectful to actual map geeks to identify as one. But I do like maps. 5 language technology solutions, 11 new language briefs, 2,300 language support projects, 100,000 plus community members, as you mentioned, 18 million words of vital information. 18 million words is a lot. I don't care what language that's in.
Well, we're actually going up. That was in October.
Oh, wow.
So it'll be closer to 26 million by now.
Wow. So, when you're asking where does my donation go? To Translators Without Borders or Clear Global, this is where it goes. It
goes into helping us. A lot of the work we do is translation, obviously. What I think doesn't always come across in these kinds of numbers is how much work we do in voiceover, subtitling, dubbing, that kind of work, particularly the voiceover and the voice recordings. Not everybody we work with can read and write.
Right. That's a whole other component of that takes a language geek to realize because people don't plan for that.
I was in Nigeria for a good part of last year supporting our program there. We have a recording studio there because literacy rates are quite low in northeast Nigeria, where Boko Haram and Islamic State in the Sahel. Oh dear. Anyway, it's been a year.
Don't look at me.
Are very active, and so most of the work we do in the 9-10 languages we work in northeast Nigeria is recording, voice recording. Sometimes it's messages for hotlines, or little jingles to get messaging across around cholera prevention. But that's a lot of the work we do. So I think that kind of work doesn't always come out. The other thing that
Well,
that doesn't come
a
out,
lot of
which
work
is
like that's just not glamorous too, right? It's like a lot of, I mean, just based on my experience, correct me if I'm wrong, or my observations, I should say, a lot of the life-saving, literally life-saving work that needs to be done is educating communities on things like sanitary practices, things like hand washing, very, very simple stuff. It's not sexy. I mean, it's not exciting to talk about, but basic information that just really needs to be put into their local language.
oh no, is that me?
What? No. Oh, I might be going out. I'll check the live stream.
Okay. But it's basic information. It's the kind of information, when you suddenly move from one place to another, you're forced to move because of a conflict or a natural disaster or whatever. There's no such thing as a natural disaster. But when you're forced to move, suddenly you're in a very different place in usually a more densely populated area. So the things you would normally do, the sanitary practices, are not the same, and they can't be the same because
Right.
you don't have the access to water, you don't have access to the same sort of sanitary facilities. So you need to figure out how to keep your family and yourself healthy. So yeah, that is a lot of the work we do. Um, the other thing I think that's also interesting about that community of 100,000 people is that there are also people who speak various sign language dialects, because we've started to put our glossaries into sign language as well.
Really?
Yeah.
I say I always learn something new when I talk to you guys. Like I didn't know there were such a thing as sign language glossaries, but I suppose I mean it's one of those things. It's like I never thought about, but now that you mention it, yeah, makes sense. There's should be sign language glossaries.
People with disabilities are often the last people to get information.
Yeah.
So sign language glossaries are really very important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and another thing a lot of people don't realize is there are many different forms of sign language around the world. And I know I'm preaching to the choir with you, but for anyone in the audience here, it's not just one sign language. It's not just two sign languages. And there are many, many, many different forms of sign languages out there. And a lot of countries, well, I shouldn't say a lot because I don't know the number, but there are some countries out there that don't have an official form of sign language. So it's home signs, it's, different dialects, quote unquote. People get by, people figure it out. But there's no, and what that means is if there's not an official sign language for a country, then there's no standardized resources available for those
Yeah.
people.
We're hopefully doing a project in Northeast Nigeria on different kinds of sign languages there. When I worked in Yemen, there's a difference between Northern Yemeni sign and Southern Yemeni sign. The one thing I remember is that the sign for American was
Wow, that is accurate.
that was Southern Yemeni sign.
Can't argue with that.
But so yeah, those are some of the you see these numbers 100,000, but that's some of the real granularity and the detail around that 100,000. And I talked a little bit about so that's the translate and train piece. So translating a lot of work, doing the voiceover, subtitling, dubbing, working in sign language, and then training people who are maybe not professional interpreters, but are still really we need people who. There aren't many professional interpreters in Nande or Lingala or whatever. So we rely on what we can, as you mentioned before. I usually start by talking about that last piece, which is research and advocate,
Okay.
because that is absolutely so critical. If we don't know what languages people speak, we don't know how they like to get information, if we don't know who they trust, if we don't know if they use Telegram or WhatsApp, then we're never going to be effectively communicating no matter what language we speak. The language is going to be critical, but we also have to make sure we're doing it in the right channels, in the right ways, in the right formats for people.
How very un-American of you to be culturally sensitive and try to understand before you just go in and start telling them what to do.
Yeah, sorry. But then,
Audience, I'm joking. We're joking, okay? Just so you know, that we're being sarcastic here.
but and then it's not just taking that information and using it for our own work. It's also taking that information and advocating and
Right.
telling and explaining to others how important it is and making it all available, openly available to anybody who wants it and can use it, and advocating for them to do that. And further than that, making sure that I don't, probably nobody's heard of this, but I have. The Security Council last week passed a resolution around a humanitarian exemption from sanctions lists. So what was happening was that whenever there was a sanctions regime that was put in place by the UN, humanitarian organizations had to jump through a lot of hoops and go through a huge bureaucratic process to be able to work in those countries. So we had a really hard time working in Syria. We couldn't bring laptops with, say, Microsoft products on them because it was banned. We weren't allowed to export Microsoft products from Syria or import them into Syria. So we had to go through and get, all this bureaucracy. Security Council recently passed a humanitarian exemption for that. That includes interpreters and translators. So it's really important for us to be able to have the platform to be able to say, look, you can't just forget about linguists.
Right.
It's been similar for, we've struggled to pay people in some of the countries. Say we can't pay people in Iran. So when we're trying
because you can't transfer money, you mean?
Yeah, well, it's illegal.
Or sanctions and yeah.
And when we're talking about a whole communities of people who speak Farsi in Europe, a lot of the translators are in Iran.
A lot of the things that you don't think about, or that you think about every single day, but us normies just don't think about and don't appreciate. So, translate and train, design and build, research and advocate. I see it here. The connection's going in and out, but we're still live. Don't worry, Aimee.
But the third bit of what we do is about building language technology.
Yeah.
That is really, the chatbots, the conversational AI chatbots that are in multiple languages that give COVID information or that support. We're building right now an information kiosk on a tablet so that farmers who are affected by climate change in Bihar and India can get information about how to adapt their crops so that they can plant and their families can continue to eat. We work with an Indian organization doing that. We're working with a Kenyan organization on building a bot so that small business entrepreneurs can more easily register as a business in whatever language they speak in Kenya.
Wow. And this is, you mentioned this is open source. This is publicly available. You're making it, you're right. This isn't, just to clarify, right, for the audience, this isn't something that you're going and reselling. These are community resources that you're providing to help them.
Working on a machine translation project for Kinyarwanda as well right now. Super excited about that.
Very cool.
Yeah. Anyway, lots going on all the time, but those are the sort of three things, the three big buckets of things that we do. Do the research, do the translation, build the language technology.
Yeah, well, I think this is my third public live conversation I think I've had with you guys in the last few years, and I'm just now every time I talk to you, not you necessarily, but someone from Clear or Translators Without Borders, every time I talk to you, I learn something new. You guys have your fingers in so many different places. You got so much going on at one time. Like it says right here, 2,300 language support projects, 100,000 community members. You got so much going on. I always learn something new from you guys. So,
well, we always learn from the language industry, of course. It is the language industry on whom we depend for a lot of the things we do. We learn from you guys. You guys innovate and do new things, and we learn about. We think, we can adapt that.
Nice.
We can use it for the work we do.
Nice. So we're not just worthless, filthy capitalists. We actually do have a part to play over here. Don't think you had to think about that a little bit too long.
I mean, I've only been in this organization and therefore associated with the language industry since 2016, so for about 6 years. I don't think
so you're a humanitarian first and a language geek second.
Yes,
it's fair
definitely.
to say. Okay.
But I don't think I've ever met a dirty, rotten capitalist.
Oh, I know. I jest. I jest. Our industry, frankly, is. I feel very fortunate every single day that I get to work in an industry that, because if you think about it, our industry is built by translators, and even I jokingly call us dirty, filthy capitalists. We got our start somewhere, and 9 times out of 10 that was because we had a love of languages, and a love of languages is another way of saying a passion for connecting two different communities that normally wouldn't be connected. So that's like the base level. That's the entry exam to get into our industry. So the language services industry is just built on a bunch of people that are passionate about a bunch of other people. And it shows.
It does. And we're very fortunate to have the support of the language industry, the localization industry. It's a fun industry. I mean, I know it can be really rough. And I'm on the good end. So, but I do feel very fortunate that this is the industry that we get to work with.
Well, speaking of which, since we did that, support from the industry, if you are from the industry or from outside the industry and would like to get involved, would like to help CLEAR and Translators Without Borders accomplish their needs moving forward into 2023, go over to their website. I put a link to it into the chat, and take advantage of this donate button right now. I was playing around with this while you were talking, and I was going to do a donation live on air, but I don't think how cool that would be to put my credit card information in with everybody watching. But I will commit here online to making a donation myself after we publish this live stream. And
that's right. Thank you very much.
Well, of course. And I would very much encourage anybody who's watching live today or listening to this podcast to head on over there and make a donation themselves. Aimee, any closing thoughts before I play us out here?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, and thank the entire language industry for their incredible support that we always enjoy. Do please donate. We always appreciate it. And tell your friends and family, and sign up to be a translator. Always happy to have more translators in the community.
All right. Well, thank you, Aimee. All right. I'll take us out. Ladies, gentlemen, chat, we are out of time today. If you enjoyed this Nimdzi Live experience, then join us next time when we will be talking to... Oh my gosh, I wasn't prepared. Look at me. We'll be talking to somebody about something next week, and it's going to be a lot of fun here. Here we go. Oh, Oscar Martinez.
I think it's Oscar.
Yeah, we're talking to Oscar Martinez. I knew that. Oh my gosh. We're talking to Oscar Martinez next week about tech-enabled video quality. Lots of cool advancements happening in the video quality space. Come join our conversation next week. Sign up. You can sign up live now and be notified when we go live. So with that, finally, once again, my name is Tucker Johnson, and I am the host today for Nimdzi Live. It has been my pleasure to join you all today. I appreciate our guest today, Aimee Ansari. I appreciate my colleagues here at Nimdzi Insights doing all of the hard work so I can have fun doing live streams and podcasts. I appreciate everybody in our industry who fills out our surveys and schedules briefings with our analyst here at Nimdzi so that we can include you in our industry research. And finally, I appreciate you guys, the audience, joining us in chat today. Kaloa, I saw you. I hope you catch that plane. See, it's another thing I love about this industry. Everybody knows everybody else, right? So good to see you, Kaloa. So yeah, appreciate you, the audience, and especially anybody with questions, comments, and especially criticisms. I very much look forward to next time. We will see you then. Cheers.